All right, let's get started. All right, so I'm going to set some context a little bit. Then I'm going to move in to give you a bit of an introduction of what we mean by decentralized identity. And then it's probably going to be one of the more unique presentations you're going to see, because when we planned this event, I had an opportunity to meet with a guy named Yaron Zahavi, and he's from Raiffeisen Bank. And so we were going to have a session where he and I were going to sit up here and do a fireside chat. Well, about a month ago, he said, I can't make it. So we had this opportunity to say, well, how do we deal with this? Should we just cancel the event? But the demand or interest was fairly high. And so we decided that we're going to do a pre-recording of his response. So consider this is going to be a fireside chat. It's going to be me essentially telling you what the question I asked him and then his response. So I'm going to give you that context just so you know what you're getting yourself into. How many are still with me? How many want to bail? You can bail if you'd like to. I'd totally leave you, and I know who it is. All right. Well, my name's Lauren Russin. I've been at Ping for about 13 years. July 1st will be the 13th year. Been in the industry about 25 years. I do come honestly about my gray. I think I've been in the identity and access management business for some time. And as we were doing decentralized identity, we had a chance to meet a few people as we were starting to roll out our early access and started to work with different vendors. And Yaron was somebody that was special because he came in and said, you know what, I have a point of view, I have an application, I'm not going to wait for decentralized identity, I'm going to jump in. And so that's really what we're trying to do is to say, Yaron's taken a leap forward. We're going to talk about some of his lessons learned. And hopefully some of the lessons learned will apply with where you guys are at. So as we dive in, this may not be, this could be a whole lot simpler then. Sorry, this is not the full deck that we started with. So what you're going to get is my question there, but I wanted to set a little context to decentralized identity at Ping. How many have attended a session of Ping's decentralized identity or are familiar with a product called Neo? How many are not? Okay, so just to give you a brief introduction, and it's about 5 slides that we're going to miss, is that we had a scenario where Ping wanted to enable end users, and you saw this probably in Andre's keynote the other day, of how do you actually give control of credential sharing to the user itself. How do you then, as a trusted provider, change our role from being the holder of credentials and being able to share that with service providers to being the registry holder, the person who holds a registry of where the verified credentials or where that information exists. And then how do we enable an end user via their wallet or via their desktop to be able to share credentials, giving them the power to share and determine how their information is shared. And so a lot of this conversation will be around this notion that we're taking away the responsibility for having to manage the credentials themselves and secure the credentials, that essentially provide a registry for managing how the verified credential provider or the issuer of credentials, how they interface with the end user, do that in a secure way to be able to present it to the service provider. So as we move forward then, I'm going to just introduce Yaron. I'll ask a few questions and then we'll move on. So first thing here is I'm going to introduce you to Yaron, and he'll give you a little bit of background around Raiffeisen Bank and what they're doing there. All right. Yes, we're missing like 5 slides, so sorry about that. And we don't have a sound. Is there a way we can get sound? Anyone? How many really want to leave? I know, we can just look like this. This is probably the best presentation I've done ever. He is speechless. Here's the funny part too, is like he is not in a bad place. I mean, he's got birds chirping in the background. He's describing himself as a security architect at Raiffeisen Bank. He's talking about how long Raiffeisen's been in business. And then he's talking about how they've been consolidating a whole lot of banks to bring together a consortium, essentially banks across all of Eastern Europe, and some of the complexities he's had. And Jason went out to see if we could get the sound going, because I don't want to sit and describe the video to you. That would be a horrible presentation. I'm getting through it, right? Getting through it. Thank you, thank you. No, I appreciate it. And Jason, thank you. So no video? You know, it could be actually in the video itself has got a volume setting. No, that looks good too. Maybe, maybe not. I can just put my microphone up to it. That might work.
So what happens is probably the audio is going through the HDMI and not through this little device that is supposed to be here.
Okay, so here's a really good question. Who was an AV guy in high school? Anyone? You need to come up, help us out? No, I think we're good. We could take questions. That would be great. So yeah, as we're trying to get this set up, any questions?
Yeah.
That was well done. Nice way to see that. That was really well done. Yes. My favorite session so far, I have to say this because I work at Ping, but I loved Andre's keynote. I really did. I think there's been so many that have been technical, they've been future-facing, but you know, I always appreciate when Andre keynotes because he gives you a vision that's, I think, achievable, and he sets the context for the problem really well. So I don't mean to like say, hey, kudos to Andre, but I thought he did a nice job. What was yours? She did way better than I'm doing right now, but yes. How many know Pam Dingle? How many feel your life is better because you know her? See, so I would invite anyway if you can find her, chase her. How we doing? Good? No. No, I think Pam's great. How about others? What were your favorite sessions? Anyone? Who wants to leave yet? You do? No, you got a question. Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
Like AI-enabled credential digital.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know he was doing that. So comment was Ian Glazer's kind of digital twins approach with an AI twist, maybe. He called them counselors. That's kind of good. I think, you know, in a therapeutic kind of scenario, which I'll need after this session, I should look at that counselor option. Are we good? Bad? Okay, one more. All right, one more question, and then we're going to figure out something else, like take my microphone and put it up to the speaker if we have to do this.
So I haven't gotten to attend any of the sessions with Ping on the new credential kind of platform that Andre talked about in the opening keynote. Can you describe a little bit about what that product looks like?
So it's a package. We call it Neo, and Neo is really just saying, how do you join this, you know, identity verification space? Because everyone's looking for some way to find a verified credential, either, you know, simply, you know, I've got a user that's using DocAuth to be able to say, you know, this is verifiable, I can do a live selfie match and store the creds. That's one approach. We've got others that are looking at, I need somebody who's accredited for working like on a windmill or an HVAC system, and so that accreditation coming from an issuer. And so Neo has, again, identity verification that comes in, allows us to verify either live or self-match, and then it's, you know, stored. Those attributes are stored, they are encrypted, and then put into a wallet. And that wallet then becomes that way of presenting. The credential is essentially the token that you need to access in. And I'm not getting to your question because you're nodding your head, and I'm not sure I'm getting it there. But
What kind of technical standards? Which ones are you following?
So there's a variety that are OpenID Foundation, and there's the credential provider there. There's W3C from a wallet standpoint. We do have part of the deck even has a section which will describe every one of those. So I wish I had that folder, but that would be some of those. Others?
What's the progress with the open wallet standards for integrating with, you know, kind of more traditionally block ecosystems so that we don't have 50 different digital wallets and that Android and iOS device native look
Hello
more used to
everyone,
and
my
have
name
probably
is
better
Beyonce
computer
Harvey.
software,
I'm
how to
from
integrate into that with verified.
Yeah, the question's a big question, and I'm not going to answer it appropriately, but the
Raiffeisen
question was
Bank
just where are we at
International.
with that
Unfortunately,
wallet
I'm not here
standardization
in person, so I'm
effectively. we have Google, Microsoft, Ping are all participating. We have some third parties, vendors that we work with that are participating in the standard. Apple, we are trying to strong arm a little bit, so if you know anyone there, let's bring them in. That is one of the W3C standards that are there. And how Ping's approached it is that we did a reference architecture and a wallet that can be referenceable by the standards body.
Hello, everyone.
And so we expect that adoption to occur.
I'm from
Abraham, please see audio, please.
All right.
Unfortunately, I'm not here with you in person, so I'm making this recording. Our history starts some 160 years ago with Friedrich Wilhelm Raiffeisen. He was mayor of a town in Germany suffering from extreme poverty. He was seeking ways to alleviate the situation, and he came upon the idea of cooperative banking. He was one of the pioneers of this idea, and it is quite simple. Townsfolk have a better chance of securing loans when they're lending from people in their own town. If you manage a bank locally, you have a better chance of managing credit risks when you know the lenders intimately as you know your own townfolk and neighbors. And the idea was indeed very successful. They managed to support each other and develop the businesses while securing funding and keeping credit risks low. They were so successful it spread out to additional towns and villages. They achieved business success and were able to buy then banks in the larger towns and finally a bank that operated on the national level. Then some generations later, 1990s, end of the Cold War, they sought opportunities in Central and Eastern Europe and bought 12 banks in Central and Eastern European countries and formed Raiffeisen Bank International in Vienna, where I serve as an identity architect.
All right, so that's Yaron, identity architect at a banking system with a whole lot of complexity is what this turns out. And so one of the questions that I asked him was to say, if you come with these 12 banks, they're all in different countries, they all have different regulations, how do you handle some of that complexity? Like, where do you make some choices there? And so this was his response. Nope. I meant this to be his response.
So, as you can imagine, all of us don't start with a blank page. We come from organizations that have a history of evolution, systems being onboarded, systems coming out, generations of evolution. And so we don't have always a clean page to start with, which means that we have to connect the dots. And today's, with good standardization of OpenID Connect, OAuth, all these ecosystems, things have come pretty mature, and there's no longer a need to lift and shift and replace all of those systems. You can go ahead and use base your solutions on OpenID Connect standards and harmonize. That is the way that we chose to do, whereby we connected to the 12 different subsidiary banks that we have, not needing to replace the systems that were in place and in daily use, but finding a way to connect to all of them and harmonize the little differences that we found in a brokering approach to reach a harmonized solution for our consumers and API gateways.
Yeah, so in the conversation, it was interesting. He kept emphasizing, the more that he chooses standards, the easier it was for them to harmonize all of the different banks without changing their systems themselves. And so they ended up maintaining a lot of the systems that worked in region, or else they were able to save money because they had trained resources that were using systems and tools that they needed. But that standardization, his language was always harmonization was what was there. So on that, then I left thinking, well, you talked about standards a lot. What's happening? Do you see this settling down? Do you see it going forward? And his opinion around standardization was it's not settled yet. And so listen to hear what he says.
As we were approaching our project of connecting 12 subsidiary banks and their IdPs, it was very tempting to step out of the guardrails of the standards and invent things a bit our own way. Our lesson is don't do that. The standards are very mature, and we've counted that between 40 and 50 standards are out there in the ecosystems of OAuth and OpenID Connect. They keep evolving, they keep being researched, they keep being threat modeled. And so by relying on the standards, it maintains a lot of focus I think you enjoy a lot of those fruits of the research that you're on a secure and steady footing that a lot of people have tried and made sure that things are secure and delivering what they should. It means that you have a higher chance, whatever the technology stack that you're using, that they're going to support the standards. And even if they're not, it's going to be in their roadmap to add support for the newest drafts and additions. So it's really the way to go forward.
That's great. So reemphasize standards, start to participate, make sure you're adopting and keeping current. And that's something that he was challenged with, especially if you're from the European Union. A lot of identity-based standards, EIDS, and all of those are coming. And I asked him then, so how do you keep up with it? And this was, for me, interesting because it wasn't a technology problem that he was trying to solve. It was actually a human problem and an organizational problem.
The lesson here is that there are so many standards groups and collaboration groups and working groups, OpenID, OAuth, ISO, W3C, DIF, Trust over IP, Open Wallet Foundation, Kantara, and so many others I haven't mentioned, that it's sometimes challenging to keep track of everything that's happening and changing, but it's very worthwhile. So if you operate a large enterprise, it makes sense to have someone be involved in that community. Either take a back seat and be part of the discussions and hear and learn what's going on, or even take an active part and represent your specific needs and make sure they're being addressed. The reason to do that is because there's a lot of change in the industry, and I think the rate of change is just increasing as new technologies and trends are coming in, decentralized identity obviously being one of them. You'd like to do that because the way we solved things 2 or 3 years ago is not the way we should be solving them today. These standards are there addressing many of the problems and challenges we all face, and there are new solution patterns that evolve, and it's definitely worthwhile to be part of that discussion and be able to reach out then to those leaders of the industry, ask the questions, get a first-hand feel of what's the right way forward. And definitely, we are very happy that we chose to go that way.
Yeah, how many of you actually have an identity architect within your organization? Vendors I know for sure, but do you have enterprise customers that have an identity architect? Yeah, I know your role is actually kind of an identity architect. And it was one thing that Yaron wanted to emphasize is that this need to start to put somebody in enterprise is important because there are industry standards, but in this next 2 slides, you'll start to see a theme in our conversation around how do you take that identity architect role and then make it applicable to your enterprise and the industry you're in. So the next question I asked him was just to say, all right, so you've got all these standards, it's emerging. Let's actually, talk about the lesson you learned with DCI. And with decentralized identity, big question I always get is, when do you start? Do you wait for the standards, I think, that came out? Do you look at, reference architectures that can get you there maybe, or do you just wait? And I remember even having a conversation at Gartner about a year ago with a group, and they're like, oh, we're waiting. We're totally waiting. And about a year later, they're like, you know what? I think we have a use case. I think we can jump in. So let's listen to see how Yaron responded to that one.
Should you wait or step into decentralized identity technology at all? Well, I would say that if you're operating in the EU, it's almost a no-brainer since the European Digital Identity Wallet Regulation passed in February. But even if you're not, we think it's the new game in town. It's a very disruptive technology. It enables a lot of new use cases. Just if you look at our case, we stepped into it to explore ways to make better use of mobile applications, have them serve as an IdP, which is a capability that decentralized identity provides with SIOP, self-issued OpenID provider. The moment we stepped in, we discovered an entire new world of opportunity, ways that it can improve how we handle workforce use cases, ways that it can improve our collaborations with third parties, new business opportunities, new service offerings for our customers. So it's such a changing technology and disruptive technology with many opportunities. We think it's definitely worthwhile to take part in it.
That's great. Nick, it's interesting the approach they took, because he said, we're going to dive in, and then there was a use case, and it was kind of a creative use case, because we thought, okay, there's solving a highly technical problem, like I've got a contractor that needs to go work on a windmill that needs to be accredited to go work on it, and I only want to give them temporary access, and the windmill is 100 miles out, so I don't want to have them come into the office. I want them to be able to present, credentials to be able to access into the building. We have those complex use cases that we have customers working on. But theirs was interesting, because you imagine they've got those 12 banks, they've got tellers in those banks, and they've got to verify a document, an ID, and they were dealing with a lot of fraud. And I call it the McLovin driver's license, if you've seen the movie. But you've got a fake ID, but it's a pretty good ID. And how do you teach a bunch of tellers with fairly high turnover how to recognize if this is fake or not? Well, consider DCI. If you simply had a wallet and you had a credential that was verified against some kind of document authentication, you could even do a live selfie match while they're standing there. That burden of the teller having to become an expert in identity fraud detection, they can give it up to the device. So that was really the primary use case that they looked at, and that's what they're implementing. So consider that as kind of an option. All right, last thing I asked Yaron was that, okay, so since you've done your first implementation, what's next? Where do you think the industry is going? Where do you think DCI could be applied? And his answer wasn't specifically about his industry, but he talked a little more broadly about what some of the possibilities are. And so let's listen to how he responded to that.
So as exciting as decentralized identity technology is, especially for someone like me working and living in Europe that accepted the European Digital Identity Wallet as a regulation this February, it's a great outlook into the future, how things are going to change. But true interoperability needs people from the specific domains to come and work together. So if you've used your passport recently or rented a car, those are two great examples of interoperability. Your passport is accepted in all the countries of the world, same as your driver's license. Why is that? It's because the people who understand this domain sat together and standardized it and agreed what needs to be on a passport, how do we make it secure, what's the data, what's the language. There's a lot of rules going into that. If you consider other use cases such as academics, so, you have here the university diploma of Albert Einstein. I think this one's from Zurich. And then he moved to the US and became a professor. Think about people who do academic studies in one country and go to another. Do they need to take algebra again? Do they need to take statistics again? So that's just one use case. If you move the country and try to open a bank account and you show proof of account existence in another country, that's a PDF that we show today. It doesn't prove much. Everyone who understands security and identity understands this PDF is easily forgeable. So these use cases would benefit from people from the industry sitting together and saying, what's an academic diploma? What are the fields that need to be in it? How do we standardize it? How do we standardize that this level of math in this university is Japan is the same one as this university in Dallas, etc., etc. Same for bank account opening, same for allergies. There are people with food allergies. There are about 9 major food allergy groups. Imagine a future where you travel in a country all over the world. Maybe some family member has a food allergy. You don't necessarily speak the language, and you're able to show a credential from your wallet on your mobile phone that tells the restaurant's menu that you're allergic to one of those 9 food groups. And as a result, without needing to understand the language, without needing to say much, you know exactly what on that menu you can eat, and the restaurant knows exactly what's safe to serve you, and everyone is happy and safe. So these kind of next level use cases require the same work that was done with passports and driver's license. The people from the domain need to come together, talk to each other, and create the standards that enable these use cases to flourish.
Right. So I'm probably running out of time. I do appreciate you guys sitting with me. And just to summarize what he said is the first is, find a way to harmonize your environments. And that harmonization is via standards. Take that theme one step further, which is then to say if I harmonize on those standards, then start to adopt more and start to participate. And so as you continue to see all of the standards in the industry, get an identity architect, that becomes their responsibility to participate and bring on. And a lot of that is because, you take his DCI example, just jump in, just get working. You start to learn what your needs are, and then more it starts to translate to your industry. And that, I think, was one of his more compelling ideas was, it's not going to be something that vendors can provide. We don't have that industry expertise that many of our customers do. But if you participate and work with us to create industry-specific credentials or industry-specific approaches, we'll start to achieve that. And that was really, I think, one of his last insights. So that's it for me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for participating. I'll be up for questions.